What's up, everybody? How you guys doing today? In this video, I'm interviewing Raven, who's a friend of mine. She's been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So when we say BPD, I don't want everyone thinking I'm saying bipolar disorder. I'm saying borderline personality disorder. It's totally different and separate from bipolar. Raven actually gets into that in the video. Yeah, I hope everyone enjoys this video. She does a great job of articulating her experience with what she goes through on a daily basis. And also, I went down the 9 symptom criteria for what it takes to be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So everyone just pay attention to that. I don't want anyone watching this video diagnosing themselves. You have to go see somebody, a professional, please. But yeah, with that being said, everyone, I hope you guys enjoy the video. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe, because I never remember to say that. All right. What's up, everybody? My name's David, but everyone calls me Wavid. I do a series on my channel where I interview people with different mental health conditions. The point of these interviews is to destigmatize disorders and humanize people afflicted with them. The best way to watch these is from a non-biased, unjudgmental point of view. What I'm trying to do is put myself in someone else's shoes, and I hope you can do the same too. So with that being said, tell the people what you got going on.
All right, I'm Raven. I'm 23. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder when I was 19. I was also diagnosed with PTSD and ADHD. Um, yeah,
ADHD is fun. I could relate.
yeah.
um, all right, so you were diagnosed at
Sorry,
19. No, that's all right. You were diagnosed at 19. How old are you now?
23.
23. Okay. So, what's it like been coming to terms with it? I mean,
Um, well, I kind of already knew. I kind of figured it out on my own. Except the ADHD that came later.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I've grown up surrounded by a lot of people with a lot of different mental health conditions, including BPD. Um, I've been close to a lot of people with BPD. Um, so I kind of knew enough about it already. And then I was in a relationship where my my borderline traits kind of started to wreak havoc, and I kind of started to pay more attention to it and, tried to figure out what was going on. And then eventually I was actually diagnosed.
Okay. Um, what was it like for you growing up? I mean, obviously, I don't. When do you think you might have started showing traits of BPD, and what kind of things were you going through growing up that might have triggered them?
So I think the first memory I have of something that could be considered borderline traits was when I was 8 years old. And it was the first time I thought about self-harm. Um, and around like 8, 9, 10 years old, I, started developing just this really like self-loathing, self-sabotaging kind of inferiority complex. My self-esteem just kind of plummeted. Um, and a lot of that was due to bullying in school. I was pretty much an outcast. Because I was gifted and talented.
Hmm.
And all the adults in my life kind of praised me for that, but then all of my peers, put me down for it. Um,
Because you were gifted and talented.
yeah,
Okay,
because
okay.
I was at one point in time very outspoken, very confident in my, like academic abilities, my artistic abilities. I got really good at a lot of things really young, and I was very, very sensitive to criticism. I was a perfectionist. And I couldn't understand why nobody seemed to want to have anything to do with me. I didn't
Mhm.
realize that it was, they were probably just insecure and I was good at things and that was threatening to them. So they had to put me down. And at some point, I guess subconsciously, I just got so lonely that like I kind of started to feel like the only way that I'm not going to be alone is if I, make everybody else around me more comfortable
Mhm.
by putting myself down and making myself small. And I think that's kind of how it started. I mean, it was also a lot to do with like being raised by a single mom. Um, my dad was kind of like just kind of lived really far away. So I rarely saw my dad. My mom was working nonstop. She was just in survival mode. There was no emotional security, emotional attachment with any caregiver in my life. There was no like, and we moved around a lot. So, I would live somewhere a couple of years. I would, make friends, get to know people, get comfortable, and then leave. So it was that instability at a young age as well.
Mhm.
Um, and that just kind of set the stage, as well as genetic factors. Pretty sure both of my parents have some traits of some kind of, they both definitely have PTSD, but they also both have a lot of like attachment insecurity and, childhood trauma, and it's generational.
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors, I think.
Okay. Um, so if you could describe BPD, what would you describe it as, and what do you think it stems from your own experience, at least? So you kind of explained that a little bit, but what do you
Yeah.
think it is?
BPD, it's for me personally, and I know for a lot of people, it stems from lack of emotional attachment security. Like it stems from attachment trauma in childhood. Um, and not having your emotional needs met
Hmm.
at an early age or ever, not being heard, not being taken seriously, having your emotions invalidated consistently. Um, and it's a lot of like subconscious defense mechanisms. And for me, I feel like it's like I was so terrified to be perceived as narcissistic. I was so terrified to be alone, to be like, you know, just that void of just I want people to like me. I want people to care about me. I don't want people to leave. So I need to do everything I can to make them more comfortable, which, kind of creates this snowball of self-destruction, self-sabotage.
Hmm.
Um, and I didn't realize what was underneath that for a long time. As while it was happening, when I was a kid, it was just, well, I guess I hate myself. I don't know. Like, it was just very compulsive. And then it was also a lot of codependency, um, a lot of putting everybody else before myself, and a lot of just neglecting my own needs and, you know, considering myself to be like the most insignificant. Um, and then, a lot of just self-destruction, a lot of just letting people walk all over me, letting people take advantage of me, letting people abuse me and hurt me because I felt like I deserved it for some reason. A string of relationships, toxic relationships that I just put up with because anybody who showed me like that kind of affection that I craved, regardless of how they treated me, it was like I needed that. Um,
Hmm.
or I thought I did.
That
Um,
that's rough. That's rough being a kid and being like, I hate myself. I'm getting older now, but I can't really remember exactly what like specific moments when I was 8, 9, 10. But to be that young and like be telling yourself those things,
yeah,
that's rough. That's really rough. Um,
yeah.
okay, so I'm gonna go down the symptom criteria and just tell me if you experience it and how you experience it. If you don't, you don't,
Okay.
So for anyone watching, you need I don't want people when sometimes I kind of like to stay away from this, but I also wanted people to understand what it is. And people like they hear they hear certain terms and they have no idea what it is at all, and they just know little things about it. So I want to give a clear view on what it is, and I guess the best way to do that is by going down the similar criteria. So if I also want people to know, you can't experience these things like once in your lifetime and then that's it. Like, oh, I felt this way once and that means I have it or I fit the criteria. These things have to be happening to you habitually and pervasively over time. So,
Hmm.
like daily, weekly. I can't say how far. Like I can't say, okay, you were distressed. Keep distress efforts to keep away or away from true abandonment, and then say, all right, yeah, I felt that you feel this once every 2 weeks. I can't say that, but it has to. You have to recognize this in yourself all the time,
Hmm.
uh, or at least consistently. And also, it has to affect multiple aspects of your life. So it's not just like just one part.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure it has to be multiple. I mean, if it's and it also has to bring you personal discomfort as well. So it's like it has to be something that's bringing you discomfort.
Hmm.
So okay, so I like to get that little warning out the way. Um, Distress efforts to keep away from true or imagined abandonment.
Yeah. Yes. And that shows up in a lot of different ways. And, you know, some ways are more obvious, um, and some ways are more, you know, subtext, like under the surface, kind of harder to pinpoint it as that. But that has shown up in my life in so many ways. And sometimes I don't even show it. Sometimes it's just in my head. Because I feel like, I would fall under the quiet BPD subtype,
Hmm.
um, where I don't really do as much of the outward behaviors. Um, but yeah, I've like, for example, like there was a breakup that was very unexpected. Um, and I was head over heels. It was like I was, I was very just totally infatuated with this person, and then but they were very, very unhealthy. And they broke up with me out of nowhere, and it had only been a couple months. Um, but I felt like it was like the first time that somebody like, actually loves me.
Hmm.
And like because I had been through so many like relationships before that were just, I didn't feel loved, but like I felt loved, and then it just ended. And it felt like just the most agonizing, like it felt like somebody died.
Hmm.
Um it was, and I remember just losing control of myself. Like I remember just like any kind of rational thought, any kind of self-control went out the window. I was like, and I was literally begging. Like I was begging, I was bargaining, I was
Yeah.
like I'll do anything. Like I just please don't do this. And then, I realized I was doing that, and I realized there was nothing I could do to change their mind, and I just hung up the phone and just immediately like went for every single one of the most self-destructive things I could possibly do to myself, like just impulsively, just like there was no thought in my head. It was just I need to hurt myself.
Hmm.
Um, it was just too much to handle. And I couldn't, I couldn't think of any healthier ways to cope in that moment. It just happened so fast. Like, and then, there have been times where I've, there's always that underlying fear of abandonment. And a lot of times, sometimes I don't even notice that I'm doing things because of that fear of abandonment. Like I'm a codependent. I'm in recovery from codependency for a little over a year. But that, has been like just people pleasing, just like, you know, letting people step over my boundaries because I don't want to lose them, or like making myself responsible for other people's well-being, making myself, I'm always, the one who will talk somebody down from like potentially ending their life. Um, and I've gone about that so many different ways, but it stems from I don't want to lose this person.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, I care about their safety. Like I don't want that to happen to anyone, even if I don't know them. But like when it's somebody close to me, it's like I will stay up for days. I will drop everything. Like I will go to great lengths to make sure that doesn't happen.
Hmm.
Um, and that also stems from trauma. But yeah, there's a lot of ways that shows up.
Okay. Yeah. No, I feel for you. That's rough. That's definitely. I mean, yeah. What's I have a question. What is it like in the exact moment? And you kind of said it feels like it when like someone's dying or something. Like the the panic, fight or flight type of thing. What does it feel? Like, what does it feel like in that moment when you realize someone's leaving, and whether you think you might get them back later or you don't know, what does that feel like?
It feels like I'm on fire.
Hmm.
It feels like actual physical pain through my whole body. It feels like I can't breathe. Like it's and it's not even just fear. It's like just pain. It's just like agonizing.
Hmm.
Um and it doesn't go away. Like it doesn't stop. It doesn't get better on its own. Like it comes in waves and it doesn't get easier. It's like being like stuck out at sea and just like in like a storm and just like having waves slamming you into like the side of a cliff. Like I was not able to function.
Okay.
Um yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Um. Okay. So, a form of unstable and extreme interpersonal relations described as alternating between extremes of devaluation and idealization. So for people watching, I mean, it's not that confusing, but it's kind of just like you love someone and then you kind of hate someone and it goes up and down in a matter of seconds,
Yeah.
minutes, whatever.
That's what we
But
call splitting.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um or black and white thinking.
Mhm.
I've experienced that again not as like overt and outward. Um And to me, splitting is a defense mechanism that once served a valuable purpose, because of inconsistent caregivers. So you have, as a child, that defense mechanism forms as like a way to preserve your positive feelings toward your caregiver when they're treating you in a positive way,
Mhm.
and to split off the negative feelings for when they're not treating you in a positive way into another, it's a compartmentalization. Um, And at that time, when it was useful and necessary, it served a valuable purpose, but then it continues and it gets brought into situations where it's out of context, where it's not helpful, where it's destructive, and irrational. And so that's the way that I see that.
Mhm.
And I've sort of been able to work through that and kind of like it's valuable to me now because it only happens when it's necessary, which is like if I love someone and I care about someone and I would do anything for them and then they do me wrong, like legitimately do me wrong and
Hmm.
legitimately cross a line. Like there's a line where like you do something that is unforgivable, where it becomes clear that you are dangerous and destructive to my safety, my well-being. My brain within minutes will flip a switch and all of a sudden I have no care in the world for you. You're dead to me. I couldn't care less. And so it makes it easier for me to detach.
Hmm.
Um, but I've kind of trained myself to be able to do that, rather than split on the people who haven't done me wrong.
Okay.
Um, and sometimes it's a lot more mild. Now for me in the recovery, like sometimes I do somebody that I care about is like, kind of triggers me. There will be a moment where I'm like, who are you? I'm like, can I trust you? And then I reel myself back in.
That's good.
Um, yeah, but usually for me it's come up as like it's come up as like I will put someone on a pedestal. Like I will idealize that person and like they are just they could do no wrong.
Hmm.
And and then once they, inevitably, you know, do something that is normal, like human, they make a mistake, that idealized perception comes crashing down. And it's like, wait. And then I start to get afraid and paranoid, like, are you really what I thought you were? And it's like, no, they weren't. Like they're human, you know?
Hmm. What's
So
it like?
yeah.
What's it like? I don't think this is asked enough. It's something I just thought of. What's it like? Because eventually it kind of, I mean, it depends if you split to the point where you're no longer even associating with them, talking
Mhm.
with them, whatever, like completely for the rest of your life. But there's a point if you're in this, if you stay in that relationship, what is it like coming back from the devaluation back to the idolization? And I'm sure that it has to happen because I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Depends on if I act on it or not.
Mhm.
If I'm able to step away and regulate myself and, communicate about it in a healthy way,
Mhm.
then it's fine. Like I just kind of let it go.
Mhm.
Um, which I haven't always been able to do. But if I lash out, then I feel incredibly guilty and just I feel like a horrible person and I start beating myself up and then it spirals. Um, so the best thing I can do when I'm feeling angry or agitated or something like with somebody that I care about is just to take a step back and just regulate myself and, continue a conversation when I'm in a more rational state of mind.
Okay. Okay. Copy. Um. So, identity disturbance. Significantly, and relentlessly unstable self-image.
Hmm.
So, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Significantly and relentlessly unstable self-image.
Yeah, I mean, for some people that manifests as like, constantly changing like goals and like, you know, one day you identify as like somebody who wants to, or like changing careers out of nowhere, just like constantly like not being able to decide who you are, what you value, what you want to do with your life. Like I haven't really had that problem. I've always kind of known like who I am.
Mhm.
But it's in times when I'm in this emotional state where I forget who I am and I start to think of myself as this horrible, like worthless, like person who like doesn't deserve anything good, and then I just it's like that for me. It's like I split on myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I will, I'll feel like I'm all good, like I'm cool, like there's not, there's nothing wrong with me, like too bad, like I'm a decent person, and then I'll make a mistake or I'll hurt someone's feelings, and then all of a sudden I'm there, I've never done anything good in my life, and I just deserve the worst, and I just forget, like um it really depends on like my emotional state. And sometimes I like when I'm very dissociated, I will just kind of feel like I'm invisible, like I'm not really here. Um, and like my perception of others' perceptions of me varies greatly based on how I
Mm-hmm.
feel at that moment.
Okay. So your view on how you think other people view you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, okay, so impulsive behavioral patterns in at least two aspects that are possibly self-damaging, like substance abuse, sex, spending, binge eating, or reckless driving. You kind of mentioned that earlier. Yeah, but
All of the above.
okay.
If you can name it, I've done it, most likely. I mean, when I was younger, it was mostly like physical self-harm, like cutting, burning myself. I would I've ripped my hair out. I've like, banged my head against the wall. I've punched myself. I've done a lot of that, mostly when I was younger. Um, and then there's also like substance abuse. I've never really gotten hooked on any particular substance, but I've used a lot of different substances, and sometimes I use substances as self-harm. There have been times where I've gone on week-long binge drinking bender where I drink half a handle of tequila to the face every day.
Hmm.
I've mixed drugs that had pretty pretty negative consequences.
Hmm.
I've, I've taken like handfuls of Valium just to not be conscious for a while.
Hmm.
I've, a lot of that. And it like usually happen when I've been abandoned. Um,
Okay.
when I go through the withdrawal of relationship, I turn to substances instead. Um,
I can relate.
and
I can relate.
yeah, and then there's, like the reckless spending. I still struggle with that also because that comes with ADHD as well. Um,
Mhm.
I, you know, I struggle with impulsive spending. Reckless driving, I don't really do that because um that scares me too much. Um,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, no, I don't drive recklessly. Um,
Yeah.
I binge eating, I used to struggle with a lot when I was a teenager. That was uh that was one of the things I struggled with the most. Um, it was out of control. Um, and but then there are like other ways of self-harm that are not so obvious. Like I've just, like staying with people who hurt me. Um,
Hmm.
and like the verbal self-abuse, like just verbally berating myself, like calling myself all kinds of horrible things, saying all kinds of horrible things to myself. Um,
I think those are definitely slept on when it comes to
yeah,
self-harm. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so actually we kind of just this is I feel like these two are kind of the same in a way, but recurring suicidal patterns, threats, gestures, or self-harming behavior. I guess
Yeah.
suicidal, like actually purposely trying to take yourself out would be different.
Mhm.
Um, you
I
know.
mean, that is what that means, that criteria, suicidal behavior. Um, Actually, borderline personality disorder is the only mental disorder in the DSM that has suicidal behavior as part of the criteria.
I didn't know it was the
Because
only one. I just know
yeah,
unfortunately, it's the highest in percentage, like 10%
yeah,
or
ten
something.
percent, yeah, 10% of people with BPD die by suicide, which is the highest mortality rate by suicide out of any mental disorder. Um, and I think 70% of people with BPD have attempted suicide at least once.
Mm,
Um, Personally, I've never actually made an attempt. Um, I've had ideations. I've been to the point where I had a not necessarily a plan, but I knew how I would do it, and I had the urge to do it, but I
mhm,
chose not to. Um, and that's only happened a few times. And I think the reason why I haven't attempted is because so much of my trauma throughout my life like revolves around people I care about being suicidal and making suicide attempts. I've had so many people in my life attempt suicide, and more often than not, I've been at least like the only person or one of the people to um try to deal with that, to try to help them or help them to get help.
mhm.
And too many times I didn't find out until after the fact, which is even worse.
Yeah.
Um so I have so much trauma around that. The first thought in my mind when that thought comes up is I can't do that to anybody else. Like I can't put people through the same thing that I've been through. Like I have siblings, I have family, I have people who love me. Like I wouldn't want to put them through that. Um,
Yeah. That's good. That's commendable. I mean, sometimes I have like depressive episodes, and it's like just like an intrusive thought. It just pops for me. It's not so much a rush of feelings and all that. It's just an intrusive random thought. And
mhm.
like but I can brush it off easily. It doesn't like sit
Yeah,
there. I don't manifest it. I don't think on it. But yeah, I don't know if it's normal for everyone to have it or whatever, but probably not. But yeah, that's definitely rough. I've never like really attempted. So, it's just a random.
yeah. I
Like, why are you even here?
I will say, there was one time that I was more suicidal than I've ever been, and I kept imagining jumping off a bridge, and I kept imagining that feeling of letting go of the edge, just letting go and falling. And I reached out to somebody who sent me a guided meditation on surrender and letting go, and I went to the woods and I listened to the meditation, and I realized that what I wanted wasn't to die. I didn't want to actually hit the bottom. What I wanted and what I needed was to to let go of control.
Mhm,
Um, because it was a situation that was out of my control, and I was trying to control the situation and I couldn't. Um, so I needed to surrender. And in my state of mind, all I could think about was just letting go off the edge of that bridge, and it just seemed so appealing.
mhm.
Um, but that was an interesting realization.
Okay. Um. By the way, I'm glad you're here and all that.
Yeah, me too.
And anyone watching, man, don't do it. Just don't do it. Okay, so affective instability because of a significant reactivity of mood, irritability, anxiety, or intense episodic dysphoria that typically
Yeah,
lasts a few hours, rarely more than days. Oh, okay.
yeah. It's just a fancy fancy words for mood swings. And
Yo, I was reading it and I'm like, bro, I don't even remember this one. But like, I think I just actually got the complicated version. I should have got like the one where it's just worded like suicidal idealization. Like, I got the complicated version here. I'm like,
yeah,
look here.
that basically just means that um we're highly reactive to triggers, um and that our emotions are very intense and can be triggered very easily.
Mhm,
Um so like, which is true, and I feel like for myself and for a lot of people with BPD, our number one triggers are perceived rejection or perceived abandonment. Um, Interpersonal triggers are like the number one thing. Like if and you know, we're hyper vigilant, like we're constantly like scanning for like subtle emotional cues from other people.
mhm,
And like sometimes I'll pick up on that and it'll send me into a spiral because I'll be like, why did they say it that way? Like, or do they like, did I do something wrong? Like, do they hate me? And then I'll spiral very quickly. Um, if I don't address it. Um, and that also means just like something will throw me off and it's harder to bounce back. It takes longer to come back to a baseline emotional state if there is a baseline emotional state.
mhm,
Sometimes I will just bounce back and forth between like I'll wake up, feel okay, and then I'll drive to work and I'll just be irritable and anxious, and then something will happen and I'll just be like, I'm so done with today, and then I'll just shut down, and then I'll come home and then I'll feel better, and then I'll see my boyfriend and then I'll be like just overjoyed, like nothing has ever been wrong. And then like, but then like maybe he'll say something that like triggers me and then I'll shut down again, and then I'll get angry, or I'll get really sad and I'll start crying, and then sometimes it's like, oh, you know, if something really triggers me and I get really really overwhelmed and I really just hit the point like where of my emotional capacity has been surpassed, um then it's like I'll go from 0 to 100 and then I'll go from 100 to 0, and
mhm.
I'll be completely numb, like just completely drained. Um, yeah, and it is very highly dependent on external triggers. Um, Sometimes it's just we think ourselves into it.
Mhm.
Sometimes when we're too happy, when things are going too well, I will start thinking about things and then I'll put myself in a bad mood.
Yeah.
Um, because being happy and stable and calm and joyful is uncomfortable. Because I know it's not going to last. So I might as well just get rid of it now. Self-sabotage.
Yeah. It sounds like there's like some like foresight there, but it's like, oh wow, it's like it's foresight, but it's kind of like, I'm gonna sound corny, but it's kind of like more like a forced sight because you're forcing
Hmm.
something that might not possibly happen.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, yeah, like it's like but but it's because I would assume it's kind of because just constantly being let down, so you automatically just know as a concrete fact it's not gonna last. It's not. This isn't gonna
Hmm.
be a thing. So then you kind of put yourself there. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
That's wild. I mean, when I say wild, for people watching, I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean it's a concept that's just like it's hard. It's rough.
Hmm.
Um, okay. Uh, so this is the only one out of all of them I never really understood was the chronic feelings of emptiness. I just never
Mm.
I never fully because I sometimes I don't like myself. Like I did a whole video on a formula for finding self love. Like I
Hmm.
understand not liking yourself, but I don't exactly hate myself. But I feel like that when I hear the emptiness, I hear it get something different. Like
Emptiness.
I interviewed Jacob, the nameless narcissist, and he said you can like feel it in your chest, like there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah. Emptiness for me. the way I understand it is it feels like there's something missing. It feels like there's something that should be there and that it's not there. And it's hard to determine what that is. And that's why we tend to seek external sources of love and attention and substances and food and anything to make us feel alive because we're trying to fill a void. And there's no way to fill a void.
Hmm.
It's an oxymoron. You can't fill a void. It's
Yeah.
like everything you put into it just makes it bigger. It there's you can't fill a void. The only way I found to fill a void is to focus on abundance. Well, not to fill it, but to lessen it, is to focus on gratitude, focus on what I do have, not what I'm missing. Um, and it's easier said than done, but
Hmm.
and for me, that emptiness I've been able to identify as loneliness that stems from chronic loneliness as a child, not ever feeling truly connected to anyone, not ever feeling cared for or, you know, having any
Okay.
secure attachment, not having any friends, just being just so alone. It's like, and I've spent a lifetime trying to fill that void, and it's never worked.
You know what?
So,
When you put it like that, when you put it in a way of loneliness, if it how it affects you like that, I can relate to that a lot. I did a whole video on how I feel lonely.
yeah.
uh, I can relate to that a lot, actually. That okay, okay, copy. I never thought of it like that. I never, you know, but yeah, I don't know. It was always the one I just never really fully understood. But okay.
Mhm.
So misplaced and intense anger or trouble controlling anger, e.g., always angry or often temperamental.
I don't personally relate to that one. That's the only one I think I don't really relate to. I mean, I've had moments. It really takes a lot to get me to a point where I'm so angry that I'm lashing out. Like it's only happened a few times I can remember. Like
Hmm.
usually when I've been angry, I would take it out on myself. Or when I'm angry, I go silent and cold, um, and just withdraw. Um, there's only maybe like handful of times I can remember that I actually lost control and like lashed out. Um, the most recent time was my ex was very toxic, and it just all kind of got to a point where it was just like I couldn't handle it anymore. It was like just the things that he was saying were so ridiculous and just so like clearly like meant to hurt me. And it was a moment where I just snapped and I just started going off on him. Um, and like I said some things that like I can't believe came out of my mouth. Um,
Mm.
but I really don't feel bad about that because I mean, if it was anybody else in any other context, I would have felt bad, but like I don't feel bad about that because he he pushed me there and he knew
Yeah,
what he was doing, and I don't really have any respect for him. So,
yeah. I mean, listen, man. Some people, man. I mean, whether you want to get into black and white thinking or whatever, man. Some people are just, you know, not inherently bad, but some people are just assholes. Like, I mean,
yeah.
how do I put it? There's some people I've done wrong that I don't feel bad about either. So, it's not,
Yeah.
it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never really lashed out at people who were innocent. Like it really you really have to do me wrong. Like you
Mhm.
really have to push me to that point.
Okay. Got you. All right. But that one is you don't really. Oh, by the way, I didn't say this. You also need 5 out of 9 of the symptom criteria that
Yeah.
we're doing in order. So
Yeah.
if you only relate to two or three of these, it doesn't count. You know, it has to
Yeah.
be.
I mean, there is like sub-threshold BPD where
Hmm.
like I think it's like I forget what it is in the DSM, but you know, you can have like a sub-threshold diagnosis
Okay.
or like PDNOS, a personality disorder not otherwise specified.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, to meet full criteria for BPD, you need 5 out of 9.
Yeah. And then some people they experience all of it. So um all right, and the last one is short-lived stress related paranoid thoughts or extreme dissociative symptoms.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another one actually. I'm not really too clear on dissociation. I feel like I do it, but I don't really know.
Um, Dissociation is it can take a lot of different forms, but it can be either feeling like you're out of touch with the world around you, like you're kind of dreaming,
Hmm.
like nothing really feels real, or feeling out of touch with yourself. It's depersonalization, feeling like you aren't real, like you're not really here, like kind of maybe not in touch with your body, um, just kind of floating in a haze. Um, and I've experienced that usually after being very stressed, like very overwhelmed, because my emotional capacity just kind of checks out and I just kind of like go on autopilot. Um, I've experienced more severe dissociation because of substance abuse, but that's, you know, substance related.
Hmm.
Um, I experienced dissociation due to PTSD as well, um, which kind of goes hand in hand with BPD a lot of time.
Hmm.
But yeah, dissociation from PTSD um, kind of is like forgetting where you are, forgetting when you are,
Yeah.
forgetting like kind of losing touch with what's happening in the present moment. Um, and then paranoid ideation, I've experienced a lot. And it's usually due to rejection sensitivity. It's usually due to fear of abandonment, um, or feeling, or due to trauma, feeling like people have ulterior motives, feeling like people are gonna hurt me, nobody can be trusted, that like, or like when I get like really just like intrusive thoughts, or like I'll go into these daydreams of just like imagining worst possible scenario, and then like being kind of on edge and hyper alert for like what if this happened, and convincing myself that like something bad is going to happen.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that comes mostly from PTSD. Um, yeah, and the paranoia in terms of BPD though usually has to do with relationships with other people.
Yeah.
Um,
Sometimes the way I hear it put it, it's like at least with the dissociation, I've heard personally have told to me that it's kind of like the way I've heard it described. It's like you're riding on a train, but you're not driving the train, but it's moving,
mhm.
going, but you know, um,
Oh yeah, yeah, that reminds me actually, there have been times when I've been like really triggered, really overwhelmed, and it's like when my rational brain kind of takes a back seat. It's like my emotional brain is running the show, and I'm reacting and doing these things and saying things that like are I feel like are out of my control. And then there's this more rational part of me that's kind of like still fully aware of what's real and what's not, but like I can hear myself telling myself like just stop, like you need to stop, like you're making things worse, like this isn't necessary, like you need to calm down, like this isn't helping. And I just can't connect the two, like I can't actually put that into action, like
okay.
it's like I'm in the back seat.
Hmm. Yeah, I've heard it put like that a lot too. Just like you're somewhere in the car, right? But you're not. It's when it's moving, but you're not driving it. You're in some type of
Yeah.
vehicle, something like
Hmm.
that. Yeah. Okay, so obviously I'm doing this to destigmatize disorders. So what do you think are the biggest misconceptions and stigmas about BPD that aren't true? At least for yourself. At least for yourself. You know, you can't speak for everyone who has BPD and everything, but for yourself.
Yeah,
What things that you know are just untrue altogether?
I was actually talking about this today, that, like there's some people who don't really understand BPD because
Mhm.
their only source of info is their toxic ex.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, you were saying
and
that.
like they conflate BPD with being manipulative and abusive and deceitful and like just like that crazy ex-girlfriend stereotype that's like, oh, I dated someone with BPD, they made my life hell, blah blah blah. And it's like they very well could have had BPD, and that very well could have been the reason why they acted that way. Because there are some people with BPD who do act that way. Um, but everyone with BPD is different. You can't find two people with BPD who are exactly the same. There are many people with BPD who aren't like that. Um, and usually when that is the case, there's probably some other comorbidity going on. Um, and they're, usually, you know, haven't had any support, haven't had any kind of therapy, haven't had any kind of way to learn how to communicate in a healthy way or regulate their emotions. Like I've been in a healthy relationship for over 2 years. Um,
Oh, good. Good.
never never really had any issue like what people describe. Like, my ex told me, he said, I pity the next person who loves you. And that was when I was diagnosed with BPD. So it was, what he got was my untreated, undiagnosed, like vulnerable, raw, just completely out of control, chaotic version of myself. And I can look back and I can see exactly what I did wrong and I can take full accountability for that. And I can feel remorse and I can feel regret and shame. But, at this point I've forgiven myself because I also know that I never intentionally tried to hurt him. Um, I never, it was never a thought in my mind that I wanted to hurt somebody that I cared about. It was always, I was trying to hurt myself and I didn't realize how I was hurting other people
Mhm.
because it was just a one-track mind. A lot of times, people get caught in the crossfire of my war with myself.
Mhm.
A lot of times I've hurt people by pushing them away because I was trying to, in my self-sabotage state of mind, I was trying to protect them from me. I felt like they were better off without me, so I would try to push them away. And that would hurt them. And then somebody did that to me, and I realized that I don't ever want to be that person. Um, and yeah, I mean, sometimes people with BPD can be abusive. I'm not saying it's not possible, but anybody can be abusive regardless of diagnosis.
I did this thing recently and it's like this documentary for that YouTube channel Borderliner Notes, and I had to meet people I've actually interviewed before who have NPD, and way I explained it, uh, and not everyone will agree with me, I'm sure, but for lots of disorders like BPD, NPD, whatever, it's kind of like a Venn diagram, and
Mm-hmm.
so like there's you put abusive people over here, and you could put NPD or you could put BPD, whatever type of disorder you're thinking of that might have some relation to manipulation or abuse or whatever. It's like a
Yeah.
diagram. So like you have people with BPD, you have people who are abusers, and then but just not every person with BPD is abuser. Not, and I mean I'm gonna get a lot of slack for this, I know, but you're on my channel, so. And then there's people who have NPD, who might not all be abusers or whatever, and
Yeah.
and it's
No,
kind of
you're
just
100% correct.
Yeah, and so like they're in the middle, depending on how big that middle might be, I don't
Hmm.
know. But it's not every abuser has NPD or BPD or ASPD or whatever, but not every, so it's a weird line there, but
Yeah.
that's the kind of way I viewed it. So
Hmm.
um
Yeah, people with BPD are more likely to be victims of abuse and more likely to be abusive to themselves
yeah.
than to abuse another person intentionally. Um, Not saying it doesn't happen. Not saying that BPD doesn't make it, doesn't make people more likely to like engage in toxic behavior because it does.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of borderline behavior can be very toxic and destructive, not only to ourselves, but to other people. But more often than not, people with BPD have like a great deal of empathy, um, to to some degree.
I feel like it's
Um,
just like dysregulated or something. It's
it's
there. Sometimes
dysregulated,
it's
yeah.
like an extreme amount,
Hmm.
or like you were kind of
Or
saying
none at all.
earlier, how it goes up and down with almost everything. The
Exactly.
empathy
It's
kind of goes up
unstable.
and down. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And like, yeah. And the other thing that bothers me, like in terms of like stigma with BPD is when people are like, it's just fast bipolar.
Okay.
Um, BPD and bipolar are completely different things.
Mm-hmm.
They come from completely different reasons, different mechanisms, different
Different
symptoms.
types
They're
of
in completely
disorders.
different category. Yeah.
Yeah, personality
Um,
disorder and bipolar is a mood disorder, so it's
yeah.
different. But
Bipolar is due to a neurochemical like reasons. Like primarily genetic. It's best treated with medication. Um, it's like and it's bipolar. It's a period of depression, major depression, which can last from weeks to months,
mm-hmm.
and periods of mania or hypomania, which can last from days to weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it is. It's not with BPD, it's like, yeah, I can experience intense euphoria. I can experience impulsivity. I can feel like I'm on top of the world. And I can also experience depression. Um, but it's more like rapidly shifting between several different emotions, sometimes within a single day. And it's not just one or the other. It's like, and it usually has to do with external triggers,
Mm-hmm.
whereas bipolar can just switch on and off. Like, it's just, there might not even be an external trigger for a bipolar episode.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. No,
Um,
well, not only do I agree, what you're saying is a fact. People confuse them all the time. Even Okay, so lots of times, not lots of times, when someone has BPD, the psychologist well, you might not act, they might not actually tell you, but a psychologist will probably be the person that will be leaning towards BPD, but the psychiatrist is the one that deals out medication. And like you said,
mhm.
bipolar is best treated with medication. And I knew someone who had BPD and they were diagnosed with that, but the psychiatrist gave him bipolar 2, type 2 or whatever, too.
Mhm.
And was just giving her medication. So
You can have both
yeah, and you can
bipolar and
have both.
BPD.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, I did an
And
interview with someone who has bipolar, so
yeah, sometimes psychiatrists will give people with BPD mood stabilizers or antipsychotics, but that doesn't treat the underlying cause of BPD. It doesn't treat the pervasive pattern of behavior. It doesn't treat the trauma or anything. It manages the symptoms. That's all it does.
yeah,
Um, Whereas with bipolar, that's pretty much the treatment.
yeah. And
Um,
it's usually functional, I think. It usually
yeah.
works. Not maybe not 100%, but okay. Any other misconceptions or stigmas you got
Um,
you have?
One more, yeah. The fact that there are more women who are diagnosed with BPD, as opposed to men,
Oh, okay, I like this one.
um, that doesn't mean that men can't have BPD. It it means that women are more likely to present with symptoms that are typically recognized as borderline and more likely to seek a diagnosis. Um, Men with BPD often present in ways that are not typically recognized as borderline. Um, they might present more like antisocial or narcissistic. They might present more like some kind of mood disorder. They might present with more anger. They might present, they might be, they might be able to mask it very well because
Hmm.
it's common for men to avoid being vulnerable with their emotions.
Yeah.
Um, and but it is very possible for men to be diagnosed with BPD.
Hmm.
Um, and it does happen. I've been close to men who have BPD. Um, and I think a lot of women might also be misdiagnosed with BPD when they have autism instead.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Because women who are autistic, they often present like in a way that's not usually perceived as what autism, you know, is.
yeah. I forgot what the percentages of her, but like women are men are way more likely to be diagnosed with autism than women because it's so much harder for the way it presents in women is just different.
It's
It,
different than the way it was studied
yeah.
because the studies on autism primarily consist of boys.
Oh, okay.
So autism in women and girls is understudied, um, and underrepresented. And so women who present with symptoms of autism it could look more like BPD. And you can have both.
Yeah.
Um, BPD, autism, ADHD have a lot of overlap.
Yeah,
Um,
man, I keep hearing that. I had ADHD since I was 6, so I but yeah,
yeah, but yeah, that's pretty much it. There's a lot of, there's gender related differences. And you can't say that it's only women who have BPD because
yeah, it's not.
it's not the case.
There's a that I my last interview was with someone who was a guy who has BPD. Uh,
Hmm.
shout out early morning barking. Um, okay, so these are two questions I ask everybody, but how do you view the world and people?
Hmm. It's very broad. The way I view the world,
Well, I guess just people, but like so,
people in general,
yeah, people in general.
I'm misanthropic.
Ooh, what does
I
that mean? I have no idea what that means.
it's a hatred of humanity.
Oh, okay.
I um I love individuals. I love human beings, but humanity as a whole is we're doomed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm very pessimistic about the future
Okay.
of humanity. I um I feel like we've just lost what it means to be a human, um and exist in on this earth. Um I could go into that, but that's pretty
Yeah.
much how I feel. And I mean, I do believe in evil. I
Yeah.
do believe that there are people who are truly evil.
Mhm.
And it really, you really have to be special kind of evil for me to see you as evil.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
no, I feel you. I feel you.
I believe that, there's a lot of people who are sadistic and self-serving and have no conscience, and mostly like billionaires. um I hate billionaires.
Okay.
But most people, just average people,
Hmm.
um I don't automatically hate everybody that I come into contact with. My hatred is reserved for the people who are fucking everything up for everyone.
Okay. Uh, how do you think people view you, or do you care? I guess people
I
you
think
know.
people I know.
Yeah, I guess people you know. I'll make it more specific. And it's kind of like the guy walking down the street. It's like I don't know, and I really don't care to be honest. But like people you know, I guess. How do you think people view you?
People view me as people view me as unique, um, creative,
Hmm.
talented. Like I'm not gonna lie, like I can paint, I can draw like extremely well. I can sing, I can do all these things. And I feel like that's what people see first. Um,
Okay.
I'm I think people view me as kind
Mhm.
and, insightful and
Insightful.
maybe a little chaotic. um, Down to earth, kind of, very honest and, straightforward and unapologetic about like I'll tell you how it is. Like I'll tell you exactly how it is. I don't sugarcoat. I care a lot about people, and I think people see that as well.
Hmm.
Um, I think some people um view me as a threat to their ego. Um, because like I said, I will tell you how it is, and I don't sugarcoat. And I used to be perceived as a target. I used to be perceived as naive, gullible, easily manipulated. But now, I feel like people who are seeking someone to manipulate, stay far away from me because they know that I can see through them. Um, and I've noticed that like when I call people out, um, they they're afraid. It it feels threatening to them. Just because my best friend told me that 'cause I posted on Facebook one time like I feel like everyone hates me,
Hmm.
and my best friend now, I had never spoken to him before this. He messaged me and he's like, I'd put money on the fact that the reason you feel hate from people is because you're a mirror, because you show them, they see the things that they don't like about themselves in you and they hate you for it.
Oh, that's pretty poetic.
Yeah. And that's how that was the beginning of my friendship with this person.
Good. Good. That's dope. That's dope. Um. So, did what kind of therapy did you go through? You said that this is post
Yeah.
recovery Raven.
Hmm.
So post recovery Raven.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah. So
So before I was diagnosed with BPD, I went through a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy and it did absolutely nothing for me.
okay.
Um, because, I can't think my way out of it. I can't use rational logic when my rational brain is offline. It just doesn't work. Um,
Okay.
but then I was diagnosed and I was in a partial hospitalization program and transitioned to IOP. So I was in partial for 2 weeks and IOP for 6 weeks at a local program. It was the women's DBT program. So I went through dialectical behavior therapy. which was very helpful. Um, it was very helpful for mainly like managing symptoms, like learning how to calm myself down, how to avoid acting impulsively, how to communicate in a healthy way, um, how to, emotionally regulate.
Mhm.
And I've kept that with me. I've kept those skills that I learned in DBT 4 or 5 years ago. Um, like a lot of it is automatic now, which is the goal. And then I went through, I've done just like traditional talk therapy, where basically I just vent and therapist listens and offers some reflection, but not really any particular kind of therapy. But then I've also done, it wasn't like therapy necessarily, it was like a support group, kind of like coaching program for like Jungian shadow work.
Okay.
Um, so we worked on the shadow self, um, and dealing with like the repressed, rejected parts of the unconscious, which was very insightful and eye-opening. And then I did some inner child work, which was kind of similar. Um, just, inner child reparenting, and that would kind of fall under internal family systems. Um, and then I did EMDR for 6 months, eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy
Mhm.
for PTSD. Um, and that was the most incredible experience. And
Oh,
that after that, I've have full remission from PTSD. After 6 months, that was
say it one more time for me.
EMDR.
EMTR. I keep hearing that. I keep telling myself I'm gonna look it up, and then I haven't gotten around to it. But
Is
I hear it
absolutely
works well.
life-changing. Yeah,
Even for
I
NPD, like I hear it works
if
well.
I hadn't done DBT first, I don't think I would have been able to do EMDR.
Hmm.
You really need like a solid basis of coping skills before you dive into that, because it was very emotionally draining. It brought up a lot of painful memories, a lot of painful emotions. After every session, I spent an hour in my car just crying
Oh,
and just releasing everything, but it was a good kind of release.
okay.
Um, it really just, I could talk about EMDR for hours, so
Yeah,
I'm gonna
got
leave
you.
it at that.
I'm gonna look into that. I'm gonna look into that. Because
Yeah.
for anyone watching, I always just recommend DBT because I've personally watched it work really well for someone I knew for about a year, and I watched
Yeah.
lots of the negative symptom criteria decrease
Mm-hmm.
a lot, like a lot.
DBT is
So
the first line of treatment for BPD for sure.
but it doesn't cover everything from what I keep hearing. It doesn't cover
No.
like it gets at first it tackles like the suicidal idealization. That's like the first thing it tries to tackle. And then there's like, thoughts, like the way you think, the way you
Mm-hmm.
act, like and like
Yeah,
the buffer in between.
DBT helps with managing the symptoms that are destructive. It helps with gaining some emotional regulation, but it doesn't get to the core. It doesn't get to the core identity disturbance. It doesn't get to the chronic feelings of emptiness. It doesn't get to the the trauma that's underlying the relationship with self that needs to be repaired. That really takes some deeper um like internal dialogue, some developing self-compassion, having those you know that soul searching kind of treatment. Um
Okay. All right. So I just have two more questions. I don't want to take up, your whole afternoon and everything. Um, so for people who are watching, like, Raven at 16, 17, 19, but it doesn't matter what the person's age is, but for before you were diagnosed and before you went into any type of recovery, what advice would you give to someone who, well, I guess that's a tricky question because I don't want to have people thinking that, oh, I have BPD, I have BPD and everything. But I don't want to say
For
someone
people
who's
who can
not diagnosed,
relate.
someone who's just been diagnosed today. Let's say it like that. Someone who can relate to the symptom criteria and can relate to you, or just someone who was diagnosed today with BPD. They're just trying to look it up, trying to figure it out. Somehow they stumbled across this video. What advice would you give to them?
Don't give up. It's not a death sentence. It's not, there's resources, you know, even if you can't, even if you don't have insurance, even if you can't afford therapy, um, there's, you can download the entire DBT handouts, worksheets, skills manual,
Yes.
and you can start to learn some skills that might make life a little bit easier. And then just gotta, see what's out there. Just, learn as much as you can about it, learn as much as you can about what your options are for, doing the work to get better. And you don't deserve to suffer. You don't deserve to be miserable. You don't deserve to, stay in situations that are not benefiting you. Like, you don't deserve to hurt. You you know, you're just a human being who has been hurt and is hurting, and you were never given the tools. You were never given what you needed to, develop the skills to be emotionally stable. It's not your fault. Um, and it can and does get better, but you have to do the work.
Okay, got you. Um, and my last question would be, what advice would you give to someone who has a loved one who has BPD and is noticing all of the emotional turmoil or the emotional dysregulation and the inner turmoil, and they don't, and they might, because I can speak from experience. At a certain point, you kind of feel helpless. You don't really know what to do. There's
Yeah.
not whether, because you can't force someone to get, you know, into any type of treatment or whatever. And if someone is,
Yeah.
willing to do it, that's great. But so
Hmm.
for anyone watching who has a family member or a loved one or even a friend, and they care enough to watch this video and learn more about it, what would you tell them to help them better understand? Well, not understand, help them, just give them advice on what to do in
Hmm.
whatever type of crazy way they might be feeling right
I would say you can't fix it for them. You can't take all their pain away for them. As much as you wish you could, there's, it's not your journey. It's not your, you know, responsibility to make everything better for this person. Um, and, of course, regardless of anyone's diagnosis, you should never tolerate being abused. Um, you should always protect yourself first, take care of yourself first. Um, if somebody is demanding more from you than you are capable of giving, you have to set boundaries. Um, Even if it hurts their feelings, that's not your responsibility. But on the other hand, if you love someone with BPD and it's not unhealthy for you, um, and it's safe for you to, be there for them, try to support them, then the best thing I could say is don't take it personally. Um, you know, expect the unexpected. Don't try to tell them how they should feel. They know that their feelings are irrational and over the top. Just putting more attention onto that isn't going to help telling them all the logical, rational reasons why they should feel a certain way or shouldn't feel a certain way is not going to help. It's just going to piss them off. Um, you just have to show up with compassion, um, validation, um, but not enabling. Like, if somebody's doing something that's self-destructive, you should point that out and be like, you're hurting yourself, like, and it hurts me that you're hurting yourself. And, here's some resources, like, here's some other things that you could do instead of hurting yourself. Like, you don't deserve it. Like, you don't deserve to be hurting. And just a lot of, yeah, compassion, validation, um, just let them feel what they feel. Like, don't try to like make them feel better when they're not ready to feel better. Like, they will be fine if you make sure that they're safe and make sure that they, give them the space to feel through it. Make yourself a safe space for them to feel what they are feeling, even if it doesn't make sense to you. Um, it's a lot of the feelings are, and people with BPD, our feelings can be so intense that it makes people uncomfortable. But like, unless somebody is lashing out at you, unless somebody is being aggressive towards you, their feelings aren't gonna hurt you. Like, you can, like, see that somebody's hurting, and it might make you uncomfortable. You might want to make it stop. Just like, oh God, how do I make them feel better? How do I make them stop feeling like this? How do I make them stop crying so much? Like, that's not gonna help. Um, just acceptance and compassion, um, and consistency. We need people to be consistent. We need people to be reliable.
Hmm.
Um, because if you've developed a pattern, if you've developed a set of expectations with someone with BPD, and then you diverge from that unexpectedly, if you don't give a heads up, if you just ghost, we're gonna assume the worst
Yeah.
and we're gonna spiral.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Thank you, Raven. I really appreciate you coming on. Um, I hope everyone enjoys this one. I really do. But it was a pleasure. I'd like to have you back on again sometime down the line. And yeah, just stay on for 1 second. Everyone, I appreciate you watching if you got this far. Thank you.